That's
It looks like.
and
Do you want me to send it a link through Twitter or?
yeah, if you want, sure. Uh, I think we're live. It's that moment, everyone, where you're wondering, is this live? Is it not live? But
I think the tagline should be, "It always feels like the first time."
so I think something's happening on the event page. So hi everyone. So if you are watching this, this is kind of a. We thought it'd be useful that a number of us are using WordPress to support open courses now, and we thought I've done a couple now, mainly with Octel, but which is the open course in technology enhanced learning. But we also use similar technology for some of the conference we're doing at Alt. So I thought it'd be useful just to have a conversation where we just chat about um, setup, the administration, bits of code that we've cobbled together that helps all this, and uh, and that general chit chat that you get on a Friday afternoon or Friday morning, depending where you are. Um, so yeah, that's kind of the premise of it all. Where should we start?
Frankly, I'm here just because I'm gonna hope to sponge off most of your code for for the project that Tom and I are working on. Um,
Well, I'm
because
curious. I'm sorry, Alan.
No, go ahead.
Martin, do you normally use multi-site, or are you doing individual installs?
This is the first time we've gone multi-site, so it's been quite interesting doing that. And the biggest headache for us has been registration, because we've got a separate registration system where people are signing up, and then we're trying to enroll people onto the multi-site in a controlled fashion. So we haven't opened general registration out, which you can do with multi-site. So we're using a plugin called AMU, Add Multiple Users. So we basically download uh, a set of email addresses from our separate login system as CSV, and then we use AMU to basically add people into the single multi-site, which works well, except for when you have existing users within your multi-site, it can't handle these. So I mentioned that it's the first time we're using multi-site, but we just turned the site we had last year into a multi-site. So we have all these registered users. So if people are coming back to the course for a second time, we've got no bulk import for that. So we're manually going through and adding people, which isn't ideal. And this is one of the things I'd love to fix for future versions. I don't know if anyone else has got that one nailed.
Not really. I mean, to me, I'm just imagining. I mean, somewhere in the the role capabilities, there's a table that associates people with a role in a blog, and so
Yeah.
there's probably some way to script that. The first round of DS106, which was multi-site from the beginning, was running BuddyPress as the way to get people to register their blogs. And we really weren't using any other functionality of BuddyPress, and it seemed a lot of overhead for the site. So it's kind of good to be coming back to that, because of the stuff that you've done kind of sets it up as a possibility for the project I'm working on with Tom.
Yeah, BuddyPress has been interesting. We experimented with BuddyPress at the Alt conference in September, which used Feed WordPress as well, and it was quite interesting how because we're pulling in one of the ways we set up the site is when we ask people to register, we ask for their email address, their blog address, and their Twitter handle, and we actually use their Twitter handle if they've got one as their username. And so, an interesting side effect of this is because we're aggregating the Twitter hashtag from feed WordPress, when a tweet gets pulled in, because BuddyPress has its own kind of similar to Twitter at mentioning at reply system, when it pulls in the blog, what essentially is a blog post for the tweet, it's actually recognizing the at mentions. So
Oh, okay.
Yes.
so I'm getting, obviously within TweetDeck, I'm seeing all the people mentioning me there, but also in the BuddyPress side with the email notifications, I'm getting a second hit essentially. But at the same time, as these posts come in into BuddyPress, because BuddyPress is updating every new post that comes in to the site, BuddyPress is adding an activity. People are able to comment, favorite, whatever they like in the BuddyPress side of it, which is a bit concerning, as you know, it might separate the comments from where they should be. But for something like Twitter, being able to comment on someone's tweet is quite interesting, and it has happened now to me. It didn't happen at the Alt conference, but it has happened in Octel within the first week.
So when you subscribe to the Twitter feed for your Octel hashtag, when it pulls in a new tweet user, it doesn't create a separate. It figures out which WordPress user it is, because ours is creating. You get a separate Twitter account for something like search.twitter.com.
Yeah.
Hoxie.
The feed WordPress, I looked into the code at how it was associating offers to blog posts, and it was doing a very basic lookup of the user table. So because when it was looking up, because we created accounts, if you're using your Twitter, had a Twitter name, it was going through the usernames, and so if it found an account with the Twitter handle, then it associated the tweet pulled in with that username. If it doesn't find the Twitter username, it falls back on the feed WordPress contribute account. So it's, you know, we, for a proportion of the people in the course, we're associating tweets with their account, their you know, the WordPress account. And it's similar for other services, because a lot of people use the same handle for, you know, Delicious and Flickr and other services. So it's the same effect of you're able to actually, for each person, we get a collection of you know, things that they've done on different networks. So that's quite an interesting effect. And this year, one of the things I actually did was to change the feed WordPress code, because the lookup it was doing was just username, and then I think it was the first name, last name fields. And it wasn't going beyond that. And because we were asking in the BuddyPress site, we were giving options for them, users, to register other, you know, Daigo handles if they were different, or Delicious handles. With the, and it's only a couple of lines of code, it's actually looking up that data now. So whereas it might have dropped something because you know, someone's got a different username, now it's associating with that user, which is a bit creepy, but I think it helps kind of, you know, when you're promoting a kind of a very, you know, go forth and be yourself where you want to be.
Right.
I think there are benefits to being able to pull that back in, and then potentially, you know, just allow people to see where other people are operating. But I guess if they're, you know, not operating in those spaces anyway, it's less useful to them to, you know, see posts if I'm not a Delicious user, it's I maybe don't want to connect with someone on Delicious, but
So you're able to also add a Digo username and be able to associate that if we're importing Digo as a feed.
yeah, yeah.
Cool. Cool.
I think I noticed on Delicious it just kind of it's falling apart in terms of the data.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I don't think we're not even going to use it, right, Tom?
Yeah, I left it because it was even just the endless page reload drove me crazy. So those were
But I mean, one of the downsides of Digo is that like if you have an octal tag, it doesn't necessarily give you a feed across Digo for that. They don't give you universal feeds.
I spotted that their database is it doesn't look up correctly. So if you have a Digo group, then you get a feed out of it, and it's pretty clean. But if you just looking for a search on the general tag, it's not there. The issue with Delicious I found as well was they've removed the offer from the feed, so it's pretty much worthless now.
Yeah, because that's one of the things is like if we bring in the feed for that Digo group, which we want to do sort of to be part of our general body of content that we're coming in. Sometimes, well, now that the mapping might work, then we might be able to associate it, but it's kind of, you want to do the whole group aggregate, but you also maybe want to do individual activity, which is why the BuddyPress activity streams are interesting to me, because then you can do some visualization and analysis based upon users or groups of users rather than the general pool as a whole. So that's we're just, I don't know, I'm just trying to learn this stuff because I've not done any stuff with BuddyPress, but I think what our concept is that if I can explain this, Tom, let me see if I get this right. There's a course that's going to be running with maybe 100, 120 students at Virginia Commonwealth, and they already have a BuddyPress CUNY Commons environment set up, so anybody with they authenticate through their email, so anybody at VCU can go there. So I think we'll have the students and faculty go there to register their blogs, and then we'll have a group for that whole contingent. Then we're going to have a completely separate standalone site for the open participants. And what I'm thinking is the registration is they're just signing up to get an account on that site. They'll put their feeds in the profile, and then we'll have two groups, and then we can just use the RSS feeds from the group activities, and then have a reader in each of the sites. Basically subscribing to the same things, but instead of trying to manage subscriptions to hundreds of blogs, you're just doing the two main ones, because if they're in the system and in the group, they're already aggregated. I think that's conceptually what we're planning, but I've just been mulling that over. Tom's closer to the action. Plus then Twitter and Digo as sort of, I don't know what else we're considering aggregating, Tom.
Those are the core ones. There may be other things we have to try and think about organically. And nice in that it's a single course, although it's taught by multiple instructors, so we'll have at least some consistency in terms of suggestions for categories to help us do some different things to chop it all up. What I'm trying to do to help get ready and run kind of live tests on this is with the larger Center for Teaching Excellence group and my group that I'm in, Online Learning. I've been playing around with merging all their feeds together. So I had this same thing occur that you saw with the Twitter names activating kind of the alarm bells and notifications within BuddyPress, except it was seen by the group as a whole as a bug, not a feature. They did not enjoy that. And so for now, I just shut down. I ended up having to delete all the Twitter feeds from Feed WordPress, because when I kind of put them on pause mode, they still kept updating, which I thought was kind of strange, and led to a little confusion on my part for a while. But yeah, I'm hoping that the group aggregation stuff will keep us from having to kind of hand enroll, 120 people, because that'd be miserable. And in a perfect world, what I'd like to do with BuddyPress is we have 6 instructors who are going to be handling the internal VCU people. So I'm hoping I can pull their 20 students apiece into a group there and then aggregate them up. So that way that the instructor in charge of those 20 has a narrow lens if they want it, that we don't have to manually really mess with a whole lot, and then we can feed them up. So you just have checkpoints along the way where you can have really specific lenses of view if you don't want to see the whole kind of chaotic mess.
Yeah, even if there's
way.
six group logs to pull a feed from, or I don't know if in BuddyPress you can create like groups of groups, where you could coalesce all the VCU students and staff into one bubble.
Yes.
But yeah, getting out of to me that's always been the biggest hurdle in managing these feed WordPress sites, is getting the feeds into the system, because it's a manual process. And for DS106 we have about 700 feeds, and just the interface is unwieldy when you have to check a feed. I would like to get in there and just hack a paginated view, but of course he probably never imagined, except for spammers, who else is going to manage 700 blogs.
Well, even the association I found, which has been irritating to me, because I've been trying to manually map the different feeds. So, we might have 4 or 5 feeds for an individual, and I wanted to map them all to the particular author in the blog.
Yeah.
But the names of the things are usually so similar, like in the view where you're mapping it, like it might be, T. Woodwar, Tom Woodward, space, 2 spaces Woodward. Like, I'm trying to track down these names and figure out which one is which and match it with the internal author name. And other than naming the internal author something weird for a little while, then going through and manually mapping it, I find that to be a really frustrating process.
But it sounds like what Martin's been able to do is like get the account names and the profiles, and then adjust that lookup logic.
Yeah. So when in the everyone's profile, they can basically register their blog, and so when the way that gets handled on the back end is because you know who the current user is. Because Feed WordPress uses the managed links, it's just a case of writing it uses some serialization to include things like author name and feed. So when someone on Octel registers their blog, we keep that association to the feed. So Feed WordPress knows that so Jim Kerr registered this feed. This is his post. So everything that gets pulled in from that feed will be attributed to Jim Kerr as an author, which works if if it's a personal blog. But if you've got a team blog, then it's all going to go to the same person. And I haven't got a way around that. But I think team blogs. Well, in your scenario, that's probably you're talking about having groups of people with a group blog. That's probably not going to work for you guys. But so far for Octel, it's been working well in terms of that, getting that association between blog and author. And I know that this was something that when Martin Weller was playing with this model a year and a bit ago, that was the huge headache for him, was an easy way for people to register their feed and then for it to be aggregated through Feed WordPress. And so it's taken a bit while. We keep stealing bits of code from DS106 to do it, but
No, we need to steal your code because the problem with our registration system is we only get their feed once, and when they change it, it all goes to be a manual.
that's one of the things we do is in the user metadata. When someone registers their feed, we basically record that the link ID within their user metadata. So if they go back and they change their feed, they're updating their own feed. So
that's beautiful.
But that was one of the bugs we had in the course early on, which we were fortunate to catch. Was I think there was an issue with, because we switched to a multi-site, because there's a central pot of user metadata. That was creating an issue, but all we had to do was make the link ID piece of data that we were collecting on the user metadata just include the current blog ID into that key, just so that if they were going to end up on another version of the site, they were pulling back the same link or the appropriate link to update.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was always like something I wanted to steal some of the. It's all the stealing. lift your code, that triggered that change, because I could see it be like a feed WordPress plugin, to do that feed lookup. But honestly, I also remember when I did this for Alec Kurtz's ETMU course, I did it the old school way. We had a Google form, and I probably feed checked 600 submitted blog URLs, and you would not believe what people will stick for a URL that doesn't work. So it was, I would not expect anybody to do it that way, but in some way, actually, I ended up looking at everybody's blog at least once, and then finding a couple platforms I never thought of using, that people use. Weebly, it has an RSS feed, it doesn't have a tag feed, but that's the long way to go.
When I was going through DS106 data, someone was using Google Docs or Google Spreadsheet.
Yeah.
As their RSS feed, and it was working. It was,
there was a way with Google Sites, I think, to do it. It was kind of backwards, but
yeah. They'd completely geeked out on the spreadsheets.
Yeah.
Which made me smile, but.
Well, and I'm hoping that once, when we get the course going, this is the second phase that we'll figure out as we go, is to get more into the type of work that you've done with pulling out some visualization of that WordPress data. It's always, I know it's in there, but knowing what people published, where, what they linked to, is really some valuable stuff, the way you did that snowfall animation. Snowflake.
It was... already within Octel, some people have been trying to start using. We haven't exposed a huge amount of data, but they are trying to make personal sense, I think, of what's going on, where people are active in different spaces. One of the things we do within Octel is we do include BBpress forums as another space where, for people that don't want to set up a blog, or another space that, we do provide kind of enclaves within Octel that they can, have discussions. And something we did was just generate an RSS feed from which basically the entire forum can be extracted as an RSS feed. And that came about because we wanted to actually see who was active in the forums, and to have a data feed come out was useful, because we could then just plug it into a Google spreadsheet and just quickly make some graphs of who was being active and when. But I think that's something we want to do more with Octel, is we are collecting all this data in, but we also want to allow easy access for the data back out. And I think that is, there's we want to do that quite coarsely in terms, kind of very raw data, but we're also thinking about other things like because within BuddyPress you can do things like favoriting, with providing a mechanism for someone to be able to export all the things that they've favorited in something that's perhaps useful in another way. Or another thing we haven't really done is we do have a blog role of all the blogs that we're collecting, but I don't know if people still use OPML formats. I know
just Dave Weiner.
So right now it's just it's a long list on a page, and whether we provide that in a different format, I don't know.
Well, it'd be nice, maybe there's something like, to be able to do something like Storify. We're able to pull things from your stream and put together. It's more or less a playlist.
Yeah.
If we want people to be reflecting and refactoring stuff that's coming through the activity stream. Tom, are they talking about using the forums at all, or is that?
Well, probably. So I know Gardner is a big fan of PHP-BB.
Right.
We also have the BB Press stuff active.
Right.
No one's used it, I think, but me in the whole install right now. But it is there. It exists. It's all this stuff. I think is relatively new to VCU. So it's a matter of trying to get people to realize it exists and then how they might use it. Actually, I think Jeff Nugent might have turned on one of the forums because I had to look up. I'm like, I don't know how you embed that. I have to do a quick Google search here. But for my clarity, Martin, if we have an individual user with an individual blog and they do the BuddyPress profile, all that stuff gets mapped and associated with the single author. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And then we could kind of aggregate them in a tiered fashion, so then we associate that single blog with a group blog more for convenience of viewing than anything else.
I don't know about on the group level. Something we do in Octel is we use categories to actually cluster different things in different ways. So we turn off Feed WordPress has an option of it'll try and detect categories and tags.
Right.
And for tags we keep that on, but for categories, and I think this is probably a key way that all of this works together, is within Feed WordPress we put the default categories as, because we have the course reader aggregator, we default everything that comes in to Feed WordPress into a reader category, and that just makes it easier for us just to filter off that initially. The second thing is, as well as having the reader category, we have a chat. Everything that we aggregate in comes into the parent category is reader, and then we'll have subcategories. So for social networks, we'll maybe have a social network category, and then we'll break that down into individual networks. So for external feeds that we're pulling in, we assign a particular category for it. And for the blog posts, we have a dedicated blog post category within the reader category, and that's the default for everything. So that means when someone registers their blog, by default it'll be put on the reader blog post category, and so we don't have to worry about that. But something I could see you doing is that data is actually just recorded in the links table. So you could have something that then subdivides it. So you could have additional categories that you want to assign to a particular feed, and as long as it's in the link table, then Feed WordPress will just use that. So that might be one way of doing it.
Yeah, that's pretty much what we've done except this 106, because whoever set up in the beginning, they did it the opposite way. Everything coming in gets converted to categories, and then I add tags to feeds to define the separate groups, but it just means you say all these feeds are going to come in and be shoved into this category, and it works really efficiently for organizing the content.
I think it probably works just as well either way. I think they're similar sort of taxonomy. So
yeah,
for us, the advantage is we can just use the in the widget bar we can just use the categories.
Yeah, I've done it that way for every other site that I've done. So it's better if you use categories internally for your own content, and then put everybody else's stuff in the tags. It also, I think, taxes the database less, because it's more intensive for WordPress to track a huge amount of tags rather than a huge amount of categories, because categories need the hierarchical relationship. So I've had actually go in about once a year, and because once we have all their tags in the site, we don't really use that. So I flush all the ones that come in from the feeds, and that's a horrible process the way I do it too. So having things come in and move everything into tags from incoming feeds allows you to use the categories to do your own organization. And so, but still, we would need to figure out how, Tom, we get people's feeds coming in. I did look at the feed from the group that you set up, and all the links point to the individual blogs, but I didn't look to see the way it maps the users from the blog. Whether the user in a group BuddyPress feed is the group is the user, or it keeps the individual user information. That's what I should look at. Because if we can do that, that's a lot simpler to me than having to manage all the feeds that people might submit.
I think within Feed WordPress it will look up the offer for individual posts. So if you do have a blog feed that has multiple different offers, then it will look up the name and associate the name to an individual if that individual is there.
Right. And I would imagine that I mean, it would make sense for the group blog feed to do that. To keep the individual author relationship, because on a group blog it maps the avatar, so it's got to be doing that.
Yeah.
I'd almost bet David Kernahan's snack over there that it does.
Come that for yourself.
Say hello.
Hello, Martin.
Hi.
Sorry. Totally irrelevant. But still, Tom, we can still think about ways that we might want to organize. Because, let's say we have the feed from VCU coming in as, let's say, one for each section. We can add the category in Feed WordPress, so we can segment them on each reader site as, section 5, section 10.
Yeah, I'm trying to think through what we can reliably expect humans to do, what we might be able to associate kind of based on the structure, and then what we might pull automatically from what's actually written. So all three of those variables are at least in my head. Not trusting humans to be logical or consistent based on my own self.
Yeah, humans are the problem.
That's right. That's meat bags.
But I mean, there is a thing. So now, Martin's suggesting this association with the Twitter name for the username. So perhaps, at least for the open participants, we suggest they create a Twitter account first if they don't have one, and in the instructions suggest that they use that for their WordPress account name. Oops. And then it's a matter of having them, probably a screencast or some instructions where in their profiles what they're going to need to add, which is probably their blog feed, a Twitter handle, and maybe a Digo name. But yeah.
if we had them enter something like, if we had a variable in there that was like, what class are you part of? That was a selection. Could that be permanently associated with all of their feeds, do you think? And that way we skip us having to do it?
Well, what I think is, like, if we can get a feed for section 2 as a group log, they don't need to enter anything, because on the Rampages site they'll be already associated, and all we have to do when we add that single feed to feed WordPress, we just add the one category that gets attached on top of that, and we're only having to do it 6 times instead of 120.
I'm with you.
I think this is all conceptual, because we haven't even done any of this yet.
That's what weekends are for.
I remember Gardner saying something about he'd like to have the site ready 2 weeks before, and I'm hoping that's going to be relaxed, because that's about a week from now.
I think I was maybe 6 hours from launch.
Well, I'm hoping Gardner tell you, but I'm going to be there the week of right before launch, Tom. So
yeah, that will be good.
Something to add into the mix,
yeah,
just to make your life even more interesting, was we've added badges this year. And,
congratulations!
And it's quite interesting to see how many people initially were. I'm not falling for this. I'm not doing your lame badges for stuff idea.
Right.
And then desperately saying, how do I enter my evidence?
What kind of system are you setting up, or what are you badging?
We've got a couple of badges. So we have weekly blocks of material, and there's a couple of badges that you can get each week from some very basic, just checking in, to more advanced. We have some advanced activities, and those are individually badged. And all this is done with, there's a WordPress plugin called BadgeOS, which was developed for Credly. So you can set it up and have your own digital badges for your site, but you can integrate it in with the whole Credly stuff. And then I think University of Central Florida perhaps have done more of this with their BlendKit course. When you integrate into Credly, it allows you to distribute out to Mozilla and elsewhere. Right. But I haven't enabled that. I've just used. I thought that was too many additional steps for the user, because they had to register a Credly account and they had to work out how to link it to their Mozilla account. I was not willing to deal with all the meat bags getting back to me and saying, how do we set this up?
Like you get a badge for just figuring out how to get a badge.
Well, exactly. So right now they just get badges within the system, and
right.
The BadgeOS is actually quite interesting in terms of integration with BuddyPress. That it allows you to automatically award badges for activities within BuddyPress. So just updating your profile could be a trigger, a step that gives you a badge, or multiple steps in a sequence could be something for a badge. So one of the additional badges we've got is if you register your blog post, blog feed, and it gets picked up into via Feed WordPress, then you automatically get a badge for that. But one of the things we've added to that is there's an option to actually let you see who else has been awarded that badge, and I think that's been quite useful for people to see. So something very basic about who's checked in, to actually see who has checked into the course, to have a block of avatars that they can quickly scan and see who else is active. And I think that's going to be interesting to see how that works over a number of weeks. We've got 6 weeks of the course, and we're expecting people to fall out, but for them to have a sense of actually who's just checking in each week, I think it's going to be quite interesting to look at. And I really want to get us issuing open badges directly from, all the data is there.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy enough to create the bit of JSON that Mozilla Backpack needs. So it's just exposing that, and people will be able to convert all the badges they've got in the site and all future badges they get in the site to a Mozilla badge.
Yeah, I think I don't know if you heard of Learning Times. They do a lot of online events, and with their conferences, they run something with Credly and a WordPress site to issue badges for conference participation or contribution. Maybe we can have badges for people who like enter bad URLs. You're not a Tom Woodward human badge, or you are a Tom Woodward human badge. But I mean, we did, Tom, talk about some sort of leaderboard or something like. I mean, that's essentially what we're talking about, is ways of tracking the activity. Whether the badges get turned into something, I think we do want this idea about being able to see, who's active in the system, what they're doing.
We pulled out a couple of, I think it was in Oxtel last year, we pulled out a couple of, because we had forums, we queried the forums, found out who's posting the most, and I think we might have done it for posts picked up by Feed WordPress as well, and just chucked them on the page.
Right.
So I think things like that are potentially useful for people to see. I don't know, I think perhaps the flip side is, if you're not at the top of the list, then it can be quite demotivating to see that you're 200 posts away from the top.
Well, even if it was individual and progressional, just so that you could at least see relative to yourself, are you improving? Where do you fit? I don't know, in a cohort group. I also am really trying to figure out what I'd like to do in the perfect world is start to use some of this stuff as a navigational element. So you start to use data to display things in a particularly visual way, and then use it to navigate. Like, it would even be fun to do like stacked bar graphs of, how many things are happening in what particular authoring environment. 4,000 tweets in Twitter, 57 blog posts here, and then start to mess around with stuff like that, being able to see it. Even as an individual, if I had like a little cube for each time I did something in a particular environment, and that was laid out horizontally, and those cubes were actually links to the thing that I did, weird stuff like that I think would be a lot of fun, and in a different way to both visualize and create interactions.
Hey guys, I just got a DM. I'm not paying attention to Twitter. I'm so tuned to the conversation. But Boone Gorges is trying to get in the Hangout. He's the BuddyPress guru. I don't know if I can invite people.
I don't think I've got Boone, so can you?
Okay. Can I just send him the link to the Hangout? Right? That should work.
Can you? Have you got the invite in the top bar?
Yeah, but I keep clicking at it.
Nothing happening.
Nothing happens when I click the little plus icon.
All right, I think I've found him.
Okay.
So I'm just going to add him.
Okay.
Google Hangout is surprisingly hard to invite people to. I have never figured that out.
There's kind of an irony there, like social media that makes it hard to get to social media.
And it's not like y'all aren't tech people. You know what I mean? I just imagine like normal humans, like just going like, I don't know, I don't understand.
I don't think Hangouts are actually code. They're people manually flicking switches and doing things, and if they're not paying attention, they miss a switch and it doesn't work.
It's like Ernestine. There he is, the standing desk guy.
Muted. So
he's supposed to be doing this on his smartphone. Where's your smartphone, Boone? There it is. He's retroed away from smartphones. He's such a brave guy.
So I guess now's your opportunity to get Boone to say how easy it is going to be for you to aggregate all these groups together, or is there a better way to do it?
I don't. Maybe I should leave the call. No, I don't have an easy answer. I just heard my ears were burning, so I thought I would jump in. And if you guys had questions about how BuddyPress handles some of these things, I know there were some questions about how activity items get attributed to groups as opposed to getting attributed to members. And I'm not sure that the answers I have are ones that will satisfy you, but I have the technical answers. So
please.
At least in that case, you can. So the way that BuddyPress activity works is that every item is associated with a user. Well, not necessarily, but it's associated. There's a user ID column basically in the database table, and you can have 0 in there if you want to. But by default, everything has an activity, has a user associated with it. And then we have a couple of columns that are just generic item relationship columns. They are item ID and secondary item ID, and basically you get to define what that schema is. So in the case of, let's say, I have a plugin called BuddyPress Group Blog that allows you to associate a blog from a BuddyPress, from a WordPress multi-site network with a specific group, and it'll do things like match up user permissions and stuff like that. But one of the things that it does is it takes, every time a feed item is published on that blog, it sucks it into the group activity stream. And so the way that it does that is that it inserts, it adds the component name groups, and then it adds the item ID of the group, group ID. And so when you go then to a group to look at the activity stream, the query that's happening in the background is show me all of the activity items that have the component name groups and that have the ID, the item ID of this particular group ID. So the rest of the data that's in there doesn't matter from the point of view of that particular query. You can just, so for something like imported items, you could import an item from let's say, map it onto a feed WordPress item, let's say, and there you could, again, just give it the component name groups, give it the item ID of the current group, and then the secondary item ID you could use as, let's say, you could connect back to the item that's been imported by feed WordPress or whatever. So it's intended to be a flexible schema because there's lots of different kinds of data that we handle in there. It's not just blog posts, but that's kind of the down and dirty of how that works.
So this is probably simple. So a group blog made of maybe 25 students and a teacher has an RSS feed. So if we use that RSS feed in an outside site through feed WordPress, it will pull in the author identified. I mean, it'll pull in obviously the blog URL, and
yeah.
In the reader, Tom, I'm not even sure whether knowing the group or the author really matters, because we're just creating it as a way to view the overall activity across both classes.
Yeah, I think as long as it links back to the originator source, I think that's what I wanted to try out to make sure.
The link definitely does. I didn't look to see where the author maps, but I think what we're trying to do, Boone, is we're going to have one Cooney in a Box site for VCU staff and students, and one for open, and then in each multi-site network have a reader that's able to look at the activity from both through RSS.
Okay.
And so we're thinking, instead of having to track 120 student blogs in a feed, if we can just put them in a group in BuddyPress and use that feed, then we're looking at one feed or maybe 6 for each section.
Well, then you've just offloaded the heavy lifting to the BuddyPress activity stream, which is fine, but you still have to aggregate all that content somewhere.
Oh, okay.
Because you'll still be pulling it into. So so you could skip feed WordPress. I mean, this is one possible answer. So it's possible, for instance, just to, like, I wrote a plugin. It's a really simple. So it's nothing like feed WordPress in that it doesn't have any real settings or anything like that. But you can basically plop in an RSS endpoint. An XML file or whatever, and it'll ping that every 5 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever, and it will create activity items corresponding to each new item that's pulled in, There's nothing stored in the post database there, so because in this case the point is just to have pointers. It's not necessarily to actually have any rich data. The downside of this is that it doesn't pull in any taxonomy because there's no native taxonomy tags, categories, anything like that associated with BuddyPress activity. It's really just meant to be a piece of metadata that says this was posted and then links you back up to the original one. So that is simpler in the sense that you don't have feed WordPress interposed in there, but it's also less satisfying because if you're actually trying to do real mining into the content, you don't have all the content mirrored in the same way. You don't have all the metadata mirrored in the same way, so it may not be ideal.
That's interesting, though. It's good to know that you can do that if you just want to bring stuff into the activity stream.
Yeah, we've got the, I think it's called the external group blog, or I've got a couple of things, plugins installed, so we have them on the Octal site, but I don't think any of the group admins have have figured this out, and they haven't enabled them. But I think that is an interesting thing to have. I think in the background of this, we're using Octal as basically a testing ground for other stuff we want to do, just to support distributed communities, and I could really see how that feature would really work well, just because we don't necessarily need the deep level of content. We just need that signpost essentially.
Yeah, you could have a network of networks of networks. Very cool. I think we have to start working on this, Tom.
Yeah, I think so. Well, it helps. The course is starting to solidify.
Right.
So yesterday was I think some real progress towards what in the world we're actually going to do. We were, as it was quoted, idling in uncertainty. Right.
That's usually a positive thing with Gardner.
Right. It was an intentional and deliberate thing, and I think it had positive results, but it also made it harder to figure out what in the world to build. But I think we'll have some progress, and I'll be in touch with you all next week, and I'm sure we'll blog up the details in a variety of different ways so everyone can learn from the good and the bad.
Well, and I'm imagining it doesn't work. The official course site, can exist in either one of our installs, and we can just map the domain within the other.
Yes.
And that way, the course information will be in sync as well.
Yes, I think so. So I just got to get Gardner's domain stuff to point. But I think they're going to do some really cool things, so it'll be fun to see the aggregate, and they're going to have some activities that'll be interesting to map, and they'll be trying to make connections between the people in a way that I think will be facilitated by the stuff that we're trying to do to bring them together. So yeah, I think the course is meant to be done like this, and that will be different and good if complex.
Yeah, but it's an interesting way to set up an open course with kind of basically two different installs, but allow them still to be able to mix and be able to see each other's content and hopefully comment on it.
I wonder how that will go down. Do you think people will start thinking it's them and us?
I'm hoping it'll play out more like DS106, where like the outside people are really interested and passionate, and that passion and stuff bleeds over into the students who are like, hold on, there are real humans who care about this stuff, and that they'll kind of be a carbonation in the mix. That's what I'm hoping for, and that we can kind of use the outside people as agitators and provocateurs, if you will.
I mean, that's the. I mean, there's a facilitator role where you're constantly pointing, the outside people to the inside, and the inside people to the outside, and you get the people who are going to be the ones who are going to who just on their own are going to want to weave together the interesting parts as meta collections.
We've already got, is it Mariana Funes?
Mariana Funes, yeah.
Mariana Funes. Yeah.
She's our star for that because she loves to do that kind of bit, and she's very thoughtful It's almost like echoing the network within itself.
I wonder if there would be any rioting. People pounding on your walls saying, "I want in,"
I'm
or "I
open
want
for a
out."
riot.
But I mean,
Something.
really, when you're looking at the activity in Twitter or in a reader, you're not necessarily you're just seeing a link to a blog somewhere. So I don't think the identification of where people basically they're going there to create their account. So if I'm an outside participant, I may do all my activity in my own blog and in Twitter, and not necessarily within the course hub.
Well, there's also something I think Martin Weller experienced was because he merged his his real course with an open course where some of his paying students were a bit miffed at the fact that open students were coming in and getting the experience for free.
Yeah.
I think it is going to be interesting for you to see how because you've basically siloed people into two pots, if that generates something that you have to deal with.
That never worries me. I mean, you're paying for the course. First of all, you're going to get the grade. I mean, that's what you're paying for. But you're also getting more attention from a facilitator teacher.
But
I don't think you're getting the same course experience as an
in
open.
DS 106 though, they were in the same space though. If
Yeah.
you're a student or not a student, an open student, you were still in the same site.
Yeah, but as a student, they get something different in terms of
Yeah.
attention and feedback that open
Mhm.
don't. So yeah, the content might be the same. I mean, but their experience and interaction is different.
But I think it's interesting that you're potentially going to have a scenario where you've got two groups of people, so that distinction is more marked, I think.
Yeah.
It may work in your favor for your maybe not for the open students, but so I'll be watching with great interest to see how that goes on, and may set up a pseudonym to start some rioting.
We hope so. I mean, we need a DS 107 going on here.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting, and part of what's interesting to me about like even why we had to do it this way is it's this weird place where like universities are like, well, we can't give people resources, for free. We can't let them onto like our WordPress site. They've got to do that somewhere else, and yet in effect, we're trying to capitalize on their energy and. We're using them as a course element, like human as OER essentially, which is something that I think is very, very true, but not necessarily acknowledged. And then it's what does any of this stuff cost, and is redirecting them, from wherever they're writing, how different is that than actually hosting the authorship? And then if you talk to any lawyers and any of this stuff, things get even uglier.
I think the cover graphic should be the pods from the Matrix. We're just going to suck out of them to power the other course.
So basically, what Alan appears to be saying is that his coding sucks. I think that's what he said.
They all know that. Come on. Boone knows that for sure. I'm an amateur, man.
I don't even reach that level, so.
Question I've got for Boone, because it's nice having him here, and we were talking earlier about registrations on to multi-sites, and the issue we've got is we've basically got a separate list of users. Some of them are existing users on our site, some are not, and how within a multi-site, how can we bulk import those in? So we use the AMU plugin, add multiple users plugin to pull in accounts, so that works well if they're not an existing user. It just can generate the account, it can generate the password, send joining instructions, but it falls over if the user is already on in the multi-site install. And so is there any way, I realize that on a code level there's something you could do there, but is there any existing plugins or snippets of code that we could use for that to bulk import existing multi-site users into a site?
Where are you importing them from?
We've got a multi-site instance, so there'll be, well, you've got the core user table, and so we've created a new, so we have a new site within the multi-site, and we haven't, we're not using the usual registration process. It's we're because we're collecting registrations externally, we have to basically manually add people into the site. Some of those people will have existing credentials, some of them won't. For the ones that don't have existing credentials, ironically, it's easier because the add multiple users plugin will do all that for us. But if the username or email address already exists, the add multiple user plugin just falls over. It won't add them into the multi-site, into the site instance.
I see. Okay, so importing just means you're adding them to the blog, not necessarily to the site. The nomenclature is confusing. So I don't know. I don't know of a really simple way to do this. I did write a plugin. That's why I'm looking at this other screen. I wrote a plugin called Simple Import Users that is built off of. Forget what I based it on. Oh, DD import users. But basically, you just it depends what your source data is, but if you have easy access to email addresses, you can basically just paste in a whole bunch of email addresses in the dashboard of a single site or of one of the sites on your multi-site, and it does all that logic behind the scenes. So it says, if this is an existing user, just add them to the blog. If they're not, then go ahead and create the user. It doesn't have a lot of options, so if you need to have, let's say, a certain, because it has to auto-generate usernames, user logins based on email addresses that you input, and so it's got an algorithm for doing that, which may or may not work for your particular purposes. This also does some basic BuddyPress stuff. I think let me see what it does for BuddyPress. It modifies the registration email that's automatically sent so that it includes some BuddyPress specific information. I think it also syncs over a little bit of, like, your display name from WordPress gets synced over to a BuddyPress profile field. I think all of that happens in this plugin too, so that's one to look at. It's on my GitHub account. I don't know that will do it for you. You may find that you can use a slightly modified version of it if the email information is easy for you to get. So that's all I have. I mean, like when I come into these situations, I usually write something from scratch because the import situations are always so idiosyncratic to the data source that you're getting them from that it's faster sometimes to just write a script. So I'm not an expert on the available plugins by any means.
I think that's made my day. I think that's what you just, and I've just found it. That pretty much fits our bill, and I think there's enough there, because the only thing that I would need to do differently is just maybe just also pull in a Twitter handle and just see if it is available, use that as a username. But I think there's enough there for me to do that. So
sweet, check it out.
Made my weekend.
The boon provides.
Yeah. So, are you doing a tour of David's house now?
Yeah, this is his kitchen. I'm actually trying to reheat our leftovers from the bar last night.
I'm not so sure about those cupboards.
Well, I'm curious how y'all are dealing in multi-site with kind of iframe embed issues, that sort of stuff. It's a little bit off of our trail of aggregation and data stuff, but it's something that's come up a couple times for me. And I've done it in kind of amateur ways in terms of trying to add OEmbed support from various sites, but I didn't know if anybody was dealing with that in a way that made them happy.
I write short codes, so because OEmbed covers a large number of cases, it covers things like Twitter, YouTube, and Vimeo, and it covers 90% of what people want to do, the stuff that's already built into WordPress. Once in a while, someone will come along with some wacky. I wrote like a short code for Prezi, for instance, so that's available in the repository. But like it just then there's sometimes people have custom ones, right? They want to embed an iframe from some website that they built that obviously wouldn't be useful as a distributable plugin. But to write one of these short codes is about 10 lines of code. You can find an existing example of it and just like copy and paste the URL format. It's basically just a URL concatenator. So that's the way that I deal with it, and then that usually works because then I don't have to like lift the whitelist or anything or lift the for security reasons. Obviously, you don't want to let arbitrary iframes in. So that's what's worked for me, and I found it even on relatively large sites with, let's say, tens of thousands of users. You get those requests pretty rarely. It only comes along once. A couple times a year I write those, so they're really easy to maintain, and it doesn't really cause any problems. So that's my recommendation.
So Boone, do you write an individual like plugin per site, or is it just part of one massive plugin that applies across?
It depends on the particular use case. For something like Prezi, which is probably Prezi was a case where this is something that was actually useful publicly, so I wrote a standalone plugin that could then be activated by individual site owners, but you could have put it in something that was network activated or an MU plugin. Some of these shortcodes are really super specific. Like I have one instance on one site where this guy has a yearly like ed tech conference at his campus, and he builds his the program, or like it's some external service that like builds the program and stuff like that, and he just wants to be able to display it in the official conference page, which is within the WordPress network, and so it's a very specific iframe format. So I just built it in a little plugin and then activated it on his site only. But as a general rule, since it doesn't hurt to have these things available to everyone, what I do, depending on the project, but what I like to do is just create an MU plugins file called shortcodes, or embed shortcodes or something like that, and just plop them all in there. The worst that happens is that means that everybody has every single shortcode available, but who cares? That's a good thing. So.
Yeah, I find myself, because a lot of the stuff we're doing is on the hoof is just putting shortcode functions into the theme, which long term isn't particularly nice. It's a bit messy, which is a bit this year around. Things like the course reader, I actually have started writing that into a plugin, so it is something that can be deployed on other sites. It's not there yet in terms of playing nice with WordPress. It's still a bit fiddly, but first step has been made, and as part of that plugin, I actually incorporate a couple of other plugins as libraries inside it. So one of it's kind of a double-edged sword in terms of it's one less plugin for the admin to have to install, but at the same time, it's one extra plugin that you have to maintain within your library. So if it gets updated, you need to go, it's not going to get picked up by the automatic update. And that's also allowed some customization. So for the feed WordPress, because it's incorporated into the reader plugin, there are bits of feed WordPress that I've rewritten just to work the way I want it to work. So I now have that headache of I have to keep the code base up to date with updates from feed WordPress, but they haven't, it's fairly stable, so it's not too bad, and it's a hit I'm willing to take for now.
Oh, Martin, you should be writing filters for those things and then building your own secondary plugin, right? Well, because you got to figure if you want these customizations, it could be that there are other people out there. So even if you don't bake them into Feed WordPress itself, at least put filter or hooks in there somewhere so that you can make the modifications separately. I can't imagine the nightmare of having to merge those things every time you do an update to Feed WordPress.
Well, I don't. It's are the hooks always going to be there though that you can, or for you to
The
get.
ones within Feed WordPress that will be, right? So if this particular site you just want to modify Feed WordPress so that it does X instead of Y, then just abstract that piece of functionality in Feed WordPress and run it through apply filters or whatever it have. I mean, the technique would depend on exactly what it is. If it's a piece of markup, then you would run it through apply filters. If it's just that you want to insert something at a certain point, then you have a do action call right there. But I'm just thinking for your own sanity.
What about?
He does have a convention for writing plugins for Feed WordPress because I'm using about 3 or 4.
Well, I don't know if so. I'll obviously the particular part that I'm rewriting is how it does the offer matchup. So could I intervene, or is it a case of letting Feed WordPress do that and then after it's done its piece, actually redo the offer markup that it's originally assigned?
That's the simplest way because then you just had to put an apply filters at the end of the whole process and then you would sort of overwrite whatever Feed WordPress has done. But there's a lot of times in WordPress what you see is that they have a pre and a post filter. So the pre filter will be something like if apply filters, whatever your filter name is, and then false. And so basically if you return anything out of that filter, then it'll bail out of the rest of the function and just use whatever you have hooked onto that filter. And if you do nothing, then it continues with the logic of the function. So that can save you some CPU cycles or whatever Feed WordPress is natively doing. Again, I don't know if that is useful in all cases. Obviously, you don't want to litter your code with filters for every single possible switch case. But I mean, if it's something where you need customization, I imagine there's somebody else out there who needs the customization as well, and that would be a useful point.
Yeah, like us.
Well, the thing is, I completely put my hands up and say I'm in the Alan Levine School of Programming.
That's a bad program. You don't want that badge, okay?
I've aced that program. I'm completely aware that I'm a lot of the times out of my depth on this, but I think it's reflective of just how the support of the community is that we can get so far down into hacking with WordPress with very little knowledge, and it still works. But obviously, we're not doing it the right way. But for Feed WordPress, the bit of the process that I'm changing is when it's processing each of the feeds. So, it's basically telling it to use a different piece of data from the feed. So do you still think that particular part of the process is intervenable?
Absolutely. I mean, that's a paradigm candidate for intervenable. Do you happen to have a link to the GitHub line?
I can show you because I committed something to Feed WordPress to basically, which has the couple of lines of code that I wanted to change. Hold on.
You ever hear from the guy, Martin?
No, he didn't like my commit either. So, which is wrong, and I should really update it because I noticed that there's a bug in it. So let me just see if I can find it. Here we go.
I've GitHubbing.
Find the right. So here we go.
Okay, syndicated post class. This is a little bit tricky if it's a direct SQL call.
Yeah.
Let me take a quick look here. 14. So it's going to try. Let me just try and see if I can understand. Check. Okay. Username is mapped to a particular author. If that author ID exists, use it. Okay, so you're looking through there, and then you try to do all of that stuff. If you don't find one, I'm not 100% sure that I understand the logic here, but you could certainly put like a right. You see around line 2000. I don't know if you're looking at the file, so I'll put it in here so other people can follow along if they want to. Around line 2000 of this file, you do an ID check, and then you do an is null check after this to do it. So you either before or after this is null check, you could do another one that's like if is null ID, then ID equals apply filters. Well, let me type it to this window so it's a little bit easier to understand. ID equals apply filters, and then whatever, it doesn't matter how you name this, FWP pre user ID false, and then before you do the next one, but before you go on to the next is null, so obviously it'll skip that is null check if you have filtered this in a separate plugin and passed in a user ID using whatever you want. So in this case, you probably actually want to say like you need to pass in more information than this. Apply filters FWP pre user ID false, and then whatever information is useful here. Let me so like login, email, etc. I actually don't know what the I don't totally understand what this code is doing right off the top of my head, but then so basically this line does nothing in most cases. That's what's so beautiful about the WordPress plugin API. I mean, there's a lot of things that are ugly about it, but this is one thing that is beautiful, is that this does nothing by itself. And for most use cases, it's just going to skip over this line and do nothing because it's just going to return false and it's going to go or return null or whatever, and then go to the next if is null check. But then in cases like yours where you have a specific way of getting that user ID, then you're going to be able to intervene in that whole process and really skip all the logic that Feed WordPress does natively. So the question of where to put these kinds of filters is much more of an art form than a science. I mean, you don't want to put these every other line in your code because it's just overwhelming for you to maintain, and it's impossible for developers to know exactly where they should be filtering. But if you put too few, then people like you have to basically fork the plugin and maintain a custom fork. So, but this seems like a good candidate where just before you do any heavy-duty logic, you would want to have one single place where somebody can sort of jump off and do their own thing, and then come back into the logic flow with that data that you provided in a custom way. So this is the way that I would suggest doing it, just for your own sanity. But there's got to be people out there who are looking for these other ways to do matching with user IDs and stuff like that. That seems like a pretty common task that you would want to be extensible in this way.
So doing this, you could have the Feed WordPress plugin, just installed as usual, and then because I'm hands up way out of my depth now. So the apply filters thing would be something that would be in your plugin.
No, that goes in Feed WordPress. So let's say that line that I just put in there, you would have to submit that as a patch request, and that would have to get accepted, and it would maybe go just around line 2010 or something like that. And then in your own plugin, you would do something like add filter. FWP pre-user ID. Yeah. Would do and then you'd have your own custom callback, and you'd feed back the user ID. And then once Feed WordPress saw that you had filtered that, then it would skip all of the stuff that you want to skip anyway. So Yeah, that's a much more sustainable way going forward to do that kind of thing. Because I've been in your situation. Believe me, when I look through like all the sites I have to maintain, there's a zillion forks that I have to maintain, and every single time I just like wrench my eyebrows in frustration. So the more that you can abstract this stuff out, so you can just set up your own sort of secondary plugin that runs in the background and it's update proof. It's really slick. So do it if you can.
Okay.
And if he doesn't accept it, you might have to just keep updating your own version of the plugin, but hopefully he would accept it. It doesn't.
Well,
cost
honestly, even if he doesn't accept it, what you can do is just your hack to the plugin could be adding that apply filters instead of having to like go through and piece out millions of different things. It's just that every time you update the plugin, you have to add that one line back in.
Yeah.
That in itself is a little less harrowing than having to do this big manual merge. I mean, just to give you an idea, so like, remember back in the days of WordPress multi-user? So we all remember that WordPress multi-user was actually a fork of WordPress. And there was this one guy, this one Irish guy named Danaka, and his job, whenever a WordPress release came out, was to go through line by line and attempt to merge everything into his MU code base. Yeah. So I feel really bad for this poor guy. He must have gone prematurely gray over this whole process, right? So as far as to the greatest extent possible, you want to avoid that kind of stuff.
Very cool. You can't do that in Drupal. Probably, I don't know. I just like saying that.
Doubly made my weekend.
All right. Well,
this is getting expensive. 2 beers.
I think you're gin and tonic, right?
I swear I'm not.
Okay, that's right. It's probably recording. Your lemonade and bitter.
Anything, really. Bit of advice for anyone out there: anything. I drink anything. I was helping someone out on some Google spreadsheets, and they run a microbrewery in the States, and he's like, "Oh, thank you so much for helping me do it. I'm going to send you some beer." It's like, I don't know if that's going to work all the way to Scotland, but nice thought.
It's the thought. Well, very cool. This has been great, Martin. So maybe we're going to try to do this on a weekly basis, right?
Yeah, I think we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
You have to start coding now, and then
I will. As soon as I get out of England.
We'll drag Boone back in. Remedial coding 101.
Boone, all hail Boone. And I don't know. I'm going to be in New York at the end of the month for the symposium, Boone. I don't know if you'll be there around.
Nice. Yeah, actually, I have to RSVP for that, but yeah, I'll be there. So.
Okay. Well, I'll be around the week.
We'll duke it up.
I think I'll be at Michael's the weekend after too. So.
Awesome.
Definitely. Cool.
Well, guys, thanks very much.
Appreciate it, gentlemen.
Thank you, Martin. And Graham, who was quiet, hello, nice to meet you.
Just briefly to explain, I've known Martin for probably about 3 years or so. My background is more sort of open access, but I've sort of recently become interested in, I suppose I've been interested in OER for some time, but I was just basically doing bugger all this afternoon and thought I would transiently watch the snooker and also watch part of this, but out of my depth to a certain extent, but I'm just here to hang it out.
Okay, well, we need to have you use the keyboards back there.
Yeah, it has been. Cool.
All right, take care.
All right, guys.
Be in touch soon, Tom.
Right.